Hey everybody, welcome to Professor Long's Lectures in Anatomy and Physiology. I'm Professor Bob Long. If you're watching these videos, you're either enrolled in my class, so learn the material the way that I want you to learn it, the way that I present it up here. If you're not in my class and you stumbled across this on YouTube, I hope you find these videos helpful. If they do, please hit like and subscribe, but make sure that you learn the material and all the details that your instructors want you to know, all right? These videos are intended for students enrolled in my course. Now, we've gone over a video. If you've watched the videos in order, the previous video was me drawing out all the blood cells and all the slides that we're supposed to see for the blood part of our test. I'm on my Canvas page on the dashboard. You can see all the courses that I have listed on my dashboard. I wanted to do this for a particular reason. The videos that you're getting are in my Human A&P2 shell. But as you know, a lot of the slides and images, the still pictures, are going to be in the Anatomy and Physiology Resources page. So when you go into Canvas and you're on your dashboard, go into the Anatomy and Physiology Resources page. You're going to scroll down to A&P2, Lab Practical 2. This is our second lab test. And you wait a second, and it's going to start having all the models, the different models of the heart and the wireman, the blood vessels of the skull, and all these other things. And then we get down to the histology. Now, I've gone over blood typing with you guys in another video. So I'm going to show you what the slides look like of blood typing. Okay. Now, this is our slides for the blood cells. So when I pull up the first one, which is a neutrophil, one of the things that you can see is these are all red blood cells or erythrocytes. As I described before, they're biconcave discs. They're a little bit thinner in the middle, so some light comes through. And then this would be a neutrophil right here. You do see some platelets around here. So please identify the red blood cells or erythrocytes. Please be able to identify the platelets if we ask you to ID those. This is a typical neutrophil. Okay, it didn't stain a real light blue, but you can see that the nucleus is very multi-lobed. It has a bunch of swellings and narrow parts. Okay. That's what neutrophils look like. I can see some granules in there, some little dots, but they're not real darkly staining, okay? Now, if I go down to the next slide, this is an eosinophil. Now, these are all red blood cells again. Every one of these cells is an erythrocyte, and I still see some platelets, okay? But this is an eosinophil. It has a nucleus that has two lobes to it. But you see these granules in here are almost the same color as the red blood cells. They're really dark red granules that contrast against the nucleus. So that's an eosinophil. Have to be able to identify the cell. Now the next slide is going to be our basophil. And we found a really nice good one here. So again, you see red blood cells. Sorry, I'm trying to make this to where you can see a little bit better. These are all red blood cells. And this is a basophil. It has a multi-lobed nucleus, but some of the nucleus is masked by all these dark purple or dark blue granules. They're almost a purplish color, very similar to this color of the nucleus. So that should give you a pretty good idea of what the three granulocytes look like. Now, if I continue on the slides, and I drew them in the order that we have them listed here, this is a monocyte. So you still see the erythrocytes and you still see platelets everywhere, but this is a monocyte. Now this isn't my most favorite monocyte, okay? Because instead of catching the nucleus like a perfect C like this, they actually caught it a little bit twisted. We can see the edges of the C, but it's like looking at the back of my hand and seeing the edge of these fingers stick out. But this is definitely a monocyte. It's got a sort of a U-shaped nucleus or C-shaped nucleus. Very large cell compared to the red blood cells, okay? And then finally, there's a lymphocyte. This is a nice little lymphocyte here. They're about the same size as a red blood cell, maybe a little bit bigger, but they're almost entirely this big round nucleus with a little edge of cytoplasm, okay? So I hope that helps you identify all the different white blood cells for the microscope slides. We will be using these pictures on our lab exams, so know them. And then the next picture I have looks like a famous picture by Edvard Munch, but of a ghost, but anyway, or a phantom or whatever. But what you see here is you see an artery, you see a vein, And then this would be a nerve traveling next to it, all wrapped in some connective tissue. So if you look at the artery, this would be the lumen with lots of blood cells in it. This dark inner layer here would be the tunica interna. It's made out of elastic tissue. This middle layer is the tunica media, which is smooth muscle. And this outer layer is the tunica externa, which is more elastic tissue. If I look at the vein, the wall is much thinner than the artery. And you can see how thin the tunica interna is. It's not very well defined, it's just very thin. We see the lumen here. The tunica media is definitely not as well defined as it is in the artery, and it's a little bit more diffuse and broken up. And you can see how very diffuse the tunica externa is. It's all broken up because there's not a lot of pressure, there's not a lot of elasticity there. So we can ask questions like this. Please identify the vessel at the pointer, or ID the vessel at the pointer. Artery, vein. ID the layer, ID the layer, ID the layer. ID the layer, ID the layer, or ID the outer layer or something. So now, I hope that helps you understand the slides for the artery and vein and the blood cells. Here's in the close-up of the artery with the tunica interna, the tunica media, and the tunica externa. You can see how well defined they are, and lots of muscle with some elasticity to it, okay? And I believe we have a close-up of the vein. And you can see how thin the tunica media is and how broken up these two layers are. They're just not very well defined. If we cut a little section out here and looked at it, this would be your lumen, which would be here. All right? You can even see a bunch of white blood cells in here with all these little red blood cells. And I believe that concludes the slides that I want you to see. Yes. So let me go back just so that you're not staring at something that we're not doing. Okay, listen. I hope that from the drawings that I made and from these slides, you're able to see what you're supposed to see and understand, and you can answer questions on the lab test. Now remember, this is not about learning for the lab test. This is about learning for your future. And there's a lot of information that you're going to come to in the future about sympathetic and parasympathetic and certain drugs that are vasodilators and vasoconstrictors, like the asthma medication. They can cause smooth muscle to contract. If you're taking an asthma medication, it can cause smooth muscle to relax and open up the airway. But if you took too much, could it affect your blood vessels? If you take too much of a vasodilator, then all your blood vessels, all your arteries would dilate and blood pressure would drop. That could be dangerous. And they're working on the smooth muscle, mimicking a neurotransmitter called nitric oxide. That's how Viagra works. And Viagra was actually invented to be a heart medication, but one of the side effects was it caused erections in males. And so it was easier to get it passed as an erectile dysfunction medication. They're still looking at it in clinical trials to dilate blood vessels for people who are having blood flow problems in their heart, but they're making millions off it now. Anyway, so you guys, somehow, some way, all of this information is going to be used in your future. I want you to learn it. Don't just memorize it for the test to get points, but learn it so that in the future, you guys can understand what you're supposed to be learning at the next level and the next level. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you had as much fun as I did. I hope you learned something. Now go practice looking at these, make flashcards, do whatever you got to do. Do it till you can't stand it. Do it till you understand it, and then do it 5 more times. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.